2012. This is the first 12 hours of 2012. How's it going so far?
Good.
Doing all right so far? Yes, very good, very good. Those of you who know my wife know that she's awesome, and she even is awesome when she's unconscious. And the other day she said that she had a dream, and the dream was that she and I were in a car riding along, going someplace with Barack and Michelle Obama. So even in her dreams, they're not pedestrian, they're on the presidential level, which is, I thought was incredible because I don't really remember my dreams at all. Do you remember yours very much?
Yeah.
They come back to you? Yeah, they tell us that women remember more than men do, but I hardly ever do. There's this one exception. If I eat a whole bunch of carbs just before bedtime, like if I would get a Snickers bar, which I would never do, and wolf that down just before I go to sleep, there will be a major motion picture in my cranium. I mean, Daniel Craig and car chases and explosions and particle beam death rays from space, and it'll be totally crazy. If I remember it, which I normally don't. This is one of the really universal human behaviors. It seems that everybody in all cultures experiences dreaming, and dreams really answer the question, what goes on in my brain when I'm not there? Remember the Night at the Museum movies when the staff and the people who are patrons there all go home and then the exhibits all come to life and run around? That's your cranium when your conscious mind goes to sleep. And the exhibits come to life and they run around and do stuff and they have this life of their own. In fact, your brain activity when you're asleep in a dream state during rapid eye movement sleep is really almost identical to your waking brain activity. It's just that you've gone home for the day and you're unaware of it unless it's really vivid and you might remember it the next morning. So you've got 100 billion brain neurons, each with 5,000 synapses looking for other neurons, all knocking themselves out, working hard all night long when you're completely unconscious. Now in the movies, we take this pretty seriously and pretend that we know a lot about it. You can spend a couple hours watching Leonardo DiCaprio running around, attempting to penetrate the dream states of other people by having his team go into a super deep tranquilizer-aided sleep. And while we're all in this sleep, we sort of enter into a Jungian collective unconscious or something. We dive into this big pool of common imagery. Leonardo, his team, and his really crazy late wife, and they all look for each other's secrets and so forth, and then come back up. But in the real world, the truth is we don't really know very much about this way of being human. We do know that mammals dream, and not just Homo sapiens. Dream behavior has been documented in dogs, in cats, in rats, in elephants, in shrews, and there's even some evidence that it exists in birds. So when I read that, it made me wonder, what does an elephant dream about exactly? Like, ooh, peanuts, peanuts. You know, a bird, oh, the early worm, yes. You know, and their brains are functioning, I guess, pretty much like ours to the extent that we can know that. But beyond some of these things, there are tons of unknowns. Now, Freud argued that what we have in dream life is repressed childhood anxieties, all the stuff you're mad and scared about, but you were too little to verbalize. It comes out later in your dreams, but since we don't remember 95% of the content, it's really kind of tough to document that beyond a few sort of case studies that he tended mostly to work with. If you're an average human being, you're going to spend 6 years of your life in a dream state. Now, if you're a Cal student who hasn't enough caffeine at an 8 a.m. class, it could be more like 7 years. But the human average is about 6 years, and these states will last a few seconds to upwards of maybe 20 minutes even per night. So you figure out how much of that, this could be 7 or 8% of your total lifespan is actually spent experiencing something that even the best science we have has had real difficulty penetrating what the purpose of this is and what it involves and why it happens the way it does and why it's different from one person to the next and so forth and so on. And yet, despite all these vagaries and all the uncertainties and the inability of hard science so far to answer some of the big questions, although there's more and more progress being made all the time, people who experience dreams are pretty sure they know quite a bit about it. There's one survey that found that over 50% of Americans believe that their dream life really contains significant truth and realities about their waking life as well. They're very, very committed to that, despite pretty massive studies that show that what you dream at night has no predictive value whatsoever for the rest of your life. There's excellent double-blind research that indicates that you really can't go by what happens when you're asleep. When you think about it, it kind of makes a lot of sense. You should probably more go by what happens when you're awake than by what happens, when you're asleep, because you can be two anchovies from disaster. You just want to stay away from all that kind of stuff. And yet on the flip side of that coin, there's just as equally a massive, in fact, larger body of research that says that human beings around the world dream about the same things. From culture to culture, they tend to have the same basic categories, mostly fueled by what happened to them pretty recently, say this afternoon and this week. And yet when you talk to people across these cultural lines, you find out that people, when they go home at night, so to speak, the same exhibits are coming to life. And they're all with Leonardo spinning the little token to find out if it's real or if it's a dream state, that this is something that we share. Maybe it speaks to something larger that we share as people. So we're pretty committed on a pop culture folk level to some way of coming to terms with this part of being human, even when our hard science colleagues are knocking themselves out at the sleep lab at Cal trying to still figure out the basics, of what the heck is going on. Now, in the ancient world, let's say the biblical world of first century Palestine, where the experiences that form the basic Christian documents of the scripture are inspired by God, and the history that they reflect is funded out of that time and out of that place. Now, in this world, this human experience is taken very, very seriously. In fact, we have documentation of people describing dream behavior as old as 5,000 years, excavated on tablets in Mesopotamia. It seems like all the cool stuff always comes from Mesopotamia, even though nobody really knows too much where it is unless they look it up and do some research today. And yet we've got centuries-old documentation of an interest in it at that time and in that place. If you jump forward a while to Greco-Roman culture around that first century of the Christian era, at this place, the biblical world that we think about most of the time when we're looking at the Christian scriptures, people take dream state experiences as messages from the gods, and as possible even messages from dead ancestors, which are designed to guide them in life, to warn them, to encourage them, or whatever. And so these kinds of things come into people's lives and are not dismissed with the way we might say, oh, you just won't believe what I dreamed last night. Now, if we're in first century Palestine and we have this kind of experience, I'm expecting Barack and Michelle to pull up in front of my house on Stewart Street any day in whatever the presidential black bulletproof limo is that they drive these days, and take Jan and me for this ride, because the gods have told me that this is my destiny, or it's fate, or at least it's a pretty good chance and they wanted me to know. Or my ancestors have felt that way and sent me this message in this sleep state that is the time when I'm receptive to this, and I couldn't be in any other state because I'm occupied with all my kind of awake type of stuff. And so this sort of thing has real traction and real gravity that it's hard for someone who comes from a more scientific or technological point of view to really take hold of, because it's so subjective. And so it's no surprise that these types of reports of dreams show up a lot in the Bible. Being a document from this ancient world, we find that this way of God communicating to people makes quite a few appearances in Scripture. And one of the places where it appears most prominently, perhaps it's the most significant place in the entirety of the Bible, is surrounding the birth of Jesus. Good things tend to start with dreams. Not always dreams that come in the night, but in some kind of idea from God that alters my version of what reality is going to shape up to be. And so when Joseph, the humble carpenter from Nazareth, Mr. Nobody from nowhere, nothing special about this guy at all except that he's just a decent man, discovers that the woman he's betrothed to, most likely a teenage girl named Mary, is pregnant without his involvement, and he considers what would be his culture's right thing to do in that situation, which is to divorce her, and he wants to take the edge off that by doing it quietly, which is not culturally or legally necessary. It's just because he's a decent guy, he wants to do the right thing in a decent way that doesn't destroy her. The Gospel of Matthew's account of the life of Jesus tells us that God intervenes in his plan to divorce her quietly in a certain way. In chapter 1, verse 20, Matthew records this, "But as he," meaning Joseph, "considered these things, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary as your wife, for that which is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit." So God shows up in the middle of a crisis and puts the brakes on and says, no, don't divorce her, don't break the betrothal, which, as we looked at a week or so ago, throws Mary out on the street, essentially. Something bigger than your idea of this situation is happening. And so the dream from God blows open Joseph's categories and says to him, the way you look at your reality and the way you look at how God interacts with you in your life maybe takes up this much real estate, but what's going on here really is this big, and what I'm going to ask you to do is tune your life in to the scale of what I'm about to do through your life. In other words, you're not just going to be the carpenter from Nazareth anymore. You're going to become the adoptive father of the Messiah, the Son of God, who's come to save the entire world. And in this nowhere life, in this nowhere place, is going to be the place where he grows in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man, and becomes prepared to die for the sins of the world on the cross and rise from the dead. Other people find out that this birth of Jesus is taking place and realize maybe not all of its significance, but enough of it in the form of what we've come to call the wise men, to follow a star to this region of the world and to report to Jerusalem, to the court of King Herod, to find out, well, where is this Messiah who has come into the earth, thinking surely he must be here in the place where all the other important people are. And checking with the scholars of the day, they find out that this birth is going to not be in Jerusalem, but it is taking place in Bethlehem of Judea, not far away. And the wise men, being instructed by Herod to report back to him once they find the Messiah, head off to Bethlehem. And the dream shows up again in Matthew chapter 2 and verse 12. "And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they," meaning the wise men, "departed to their own country by another way." They realize that what Herod really wants to do is use their intelligence gathering capability to locate this child, and then the child's going to be killed to erase a potential competitor. And in this case, the dream doesn't blow open their reality, it redirects their path in a way that's going to keep God's plan moving forward, that was launched through the conception of the child in the body of the Virgin Mary. They leave, and Herod never sees them again. They escape. He's furious, and now he is giving orders to round up every infant under the age of 2 in the region where this has taken place, and all of these children are going to be put to death. It's a terrible example of a massacre, once again, just to make sure that there's no possible way that anyone else can be looked at as the king of this particular area. Joseph and Mary are right in the crosshairs of this. They are in the path of this steamroller of violence that this king is constantly pushing over his land. And Matthew records in the next verse, in verse 13 of chapter 2, "Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Rise, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Now this is the second time that their path is redirected to avoid a threat, and this dream from God becomes a way not just for them to avoid this violence, but to keep the plan on track. They flee to Egypt, and they're there for an unknown period of time to get away from this incredibly violent and vicious king. And while they're there, Herod passes away, and the time for them to return to Palestine comes. And in chapter 2, Matthew records in verse 19, "But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt." And the message is, you can go home now. And so now they're not being run off, but the plan is being put back on track through the same dream delivery system. As they're coming home, they discover that Herod has indeed passed away. He's been replaced by Archelaus, his son, and things have simply gone from bad to worse because Herod was a bad man. Archelaus is a bad man who is also insane and was violent just off the scale. And so they know if Herod was going to kill our baby, Archelaus is probably going to exterminate us all. And as a result, they decide to veer off and to take another path in order to evade him. And in verse 22, Matthew says, "But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he, Joseph, was afraid to go there, and being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee." Now, I've got to tell you, I've been reading the birth of Jesus story for a lot of years, and I have never noticed the dreams before. They're in a few Christmas carols. I've seen them in a couple Christmas cards, but I never put together that in just the first couple of chapters of Matthew, which is one of the two extended accounts of this that we have, there are 5 instances of this. And I don't think this merely reflects the ancient world's thinking about dreaming. This is actually God showing up and speaking to this man, and Matthew recording it as inspired by the Holy Spirit to bring us that story. And if you look at it this way, no dreams, no story. Now, the dreams aren't the only thing. You know, we use the phrase connect the dots sometimes. Well, in a way, in this narrative, the trips are sort of the dots, and the dreams are the connections. Each dream is necessary to take the journey to the next place. Sometimes it's forward, sometimes it's Egypt, sometimes it's, like Monty Python, run away, and they do, and then they come back when things are safe again. But no dreams, no story. Now, the dreams aren't the only thing that make the story work. For example, Joseph didn't have an angel warn him in a dream that Archelaus was dangerous. Matthew says he heard it. He found out through normal human means. The wise men followed the star. I'm still trying to figure this one out, to the wrong city. It's Jerusalem. And it's actually from the Jewish scriptures and the prophecies about the Messiah that they found out that they were supposed to go to Bethlehem. And then the star takes them to Jesus' home. And as a result of that, you've got all kinds of other dynamics wrapped up in it that continue to operate. It doesn't totally depend on the dreams, but if you subtract them, no dreams, no story. So it made me wonder, what is our plan for living 2012? The story that 2012 will be. 2012 is born today. This first day of the year only comes one time. Now, for most people, the way that you manage a new year is using the technology of New Year's resolutions. And probably there's an app for that. But even if there isn't, you can just use Post-it notes and put them on the refrigerator, or make a list in a Word document and save it someplace. About 45% of us are going to do that. We're going to make some kind of New Year's resolution. That's a pretty big, 45% of us don't do anything. That's a phenomenally large percentage. And I heard yesterday on the television news that today 40,000 new laws go into effect. So the government has certainly decided on some New Year's resolutions. So don't get arrested. 40,000 new laws, considering state, local, and federal, all began when the ball dropped in Times Square last night. It's unbelievable how committed we are to the concept of more resolve. That's what a resolution is. It's a point resolve. If I can just summon up the willpower, and then you fill in the blank. Often it has a lot to do with losing weight, or going to the gym more often, or I'm really going to cut back on those Snickers bars before bedtime because I just can't stand the Technicolor dreams anymore. Or I'm going to call my mom once a week. That would be probably a good one for me. Or the oil change on the car. I'm not going 12,000 miles the next time. Really, I swear I'm not. I'm going to do all of these things. And so I pack a big to-do list, I guess you could call it. And so my life is going to be working my way down through this to-do list. And the notion is, this is very, very Western, very American. The notion is once I get to the bottom of the to-do list, I will have a better, more meaningful, more fruitful life than I had in the absence of all my New Year's resolutions. 1 year later, surveys find that 10% of the people who started with resolutions are still keeping them. And so it's pretty much a guaranteed failure. And I think the way we're going to live 2012 is probably going to be about the same way. And I have to go back to Matthew's account and say about this coming year, for us individually, for us as a church, no dreams, no story. The story of 2012 is going to be the story of the dream God gives you for this year. And to live a year that is not a tweaked up version of 2011. To live a year that is not 2011 plus the resolutions I need to improve things. To, if you will, switch from a rowboat to a sailboat, which is the change from resolve to a dream. You know, our New Year's resolutions are not big enough to hold our soul. Our job, our school, our education, they're not big enough to hold our soul. The only thing big enough to hold your soul is a dream from God. No dreams, no story. Now, every time I get the chance, I mention that I've been a Pittsburgh Steelers fan for 50 years. 50 years. Before Super Bowls, before any of it, I was a Steelers fan. If you cut me, I bleed blue and gold. I have blue and gold socks. My wife for Christmas bought me a Pittsburgh Steelers player jersey, which I wear around the house sometimes. It's completely embarrassing. But when you're from this city and you grew up in that culture, it's almost impossible to explain to people who don't have insider cultural knowledge what that means to natives. That's an indigenous cultural experience to me. So I listen to Steeler radio when I'm working out at the Y on my phone. I read Steeler blogs, I watch Steeler videos, I watch the coaches' press conference every Tuesday morning by video. All of us are completely absorbed by this football team. And you cannot watch a Steeler game with just anyone. If you don't know football and you want to say silly things like, are there more chips? You can't come. If it's 3rd and 8, I need you to understand what that means to me. And the difference between a zone blitz and a safety blitz. You have to be able to be inside the experience. And if you're not inside, and if you're just there for the refreshments and the chit-chat and for fellowship, you need another team because it's just not happening. So my wife knows this about me because she's the presidential dreamer girl. She's amazing. And today, the Steelers play our most hated rival, the Cleveland Browns. I want to spit on the sidewalk just to say the name. It's very much like the Cal-Stanford rival. It's on that level. Once again, if you didn't grow up in steel country from the industrial Northeast, no concept of what this means. This is strictly insider, but it's deeply gratifying to me. And so when we go home, I am putting on my Ben Roethlisberger jersey and putting on my black and gold socks and getting ready to watch the Steelers stomp the living daylights out of the Cleveland Browns, except we don't get the game in this city. Because they're watching other teams, like the Raiders. My wife knows that I will be traumatized almost beyond words if I don't get to see this game. So last night, she gets on the phone with DirecTV and talks to someone named Jeremy after being on hold for 12 or 15 minutes and says, can you buy just, one game pay-per-view? She's thinking, that's like $2. One game, there's so many, how could it be worth much? And it turns out that you can. It's $44 to buy one game. So we're not going there. And she works with Jeremy for a while because my wife is the queen of customer service. She has powers when it comes to customer service. She's like a gift from a god, to make things happen. And so lo and behold, Jeremy's all of a sudden got this 90-day sort of startup trial package that you can buy for just a few dollars a month, to see if you like it or not. And then you have to remember to call in and cancel, or they start slamming it to you at the regular rate. So Jan she signs me up, and she says to Jeremy, "Now, will this actually be on tomorrow so my husband can watch this game?" I love this woman. You got to understand me. And he says it could be. And if it's not, you just call us up. Now, this is my dream, to go home and for the first time in my life to be able to actually watch one of these games live when it's blacked out in my area. This has no meaning to anyone else here. But to me, that story makes that's my whole day. That's my life. Come on, man, playoff time's coming. I mean, this is just huge for me. And what's so huge about it is I haven't seen a game yet. See, the knowledge that the game is on the other side of this event this morning pulls me forward like a sail. When I try to run my life with resolutions and shouldas and oughtas and gottas and to-do lists, that stuff drives me from behind. That's like being beaten with a whip. You ought to be this, and you should be thinner or taller or have brown eyes or blue eyes or smarter or read more books or watch less TV or whatever. The truth is you can never be beaten enough times to become what you need to be. What we need in 2012 is a big dream from God. When that big dream is alive in your heart, when you've got your Steelers-Browns game, whatever that is for you in your life, and we've got that as a church, that big dream fills all the other categories. It pulls everything else forward, and you end up making more changes, being a better person, a stronger person, a more godly person, a more Jesus representative person, more of a mirror and a reflection of God's love and strength and power in your life, in your home, in your dorm, in your job, because you've got something from God that's in you that's bigger than you and bigger than me and bigger than all of us. And to live that out is to become the life, to become the person that Jesus has designed you to be. Ask our musicians to come back and just for a moment or so and to lead us for a little bit. Here's what I'd like you to do is, while they're leading us and we're worshiping the Lord, just spend some time thinking in your own heart, what's my dream for this year? What would I like God to just blow up this year? What am I feeling like God is saying? Or maybe you're here without that for this coming year. Ask the Lord to speak that to you, to begin to give that to you, so that you can live a life that's more than a list of the stuff you ought to be doing, and live a life that's pulled forward by a presence, a power, just the passion for who God wants you to be.